Hey, welcome to 6-2, where we talk about the railroads. Transcontinental Railroad is exactly what it sounds like, a railroad that goes across the continent. And of course, the rails were already established to, the Midwest roughly. There you can see Omaha on the map, and Promontory Point, that's supposedly halfway between from where Sacramento and Omaha was. The reason why that's highlighted is that's where the two sides of the Transcontinental Railroad met, and it's where the Golden Spike is placed in Promontory Point, Utah. And of course, rail, well, we don't really use it on the West Coast that much for passengers, but we certainly use it a lot for freight and things like that. But this connected the country together. The next one, as we see here, is George Pullman. And this person invented the sleeping car. And this is, of course, exactly what it sounds like, where some of the train cars actually, turn into beds where you can sleep. And, sometimes it would take several days to go on these long trips by rail, and comfort was pretty important. And if you could afford it, then it would be a good idea to have a sleeping car. We're going to talk about George Pullman later on as well. It's because he's one of the people that actually owned what we call a company town, where every single thing from school to hospital to housing to grocery store was controlled by the company, and that goes on to cause problems. But that's for a little bit later. The Credit Mobilier scandal. This was one of the biggest, I guess, frauds or ripoffs that you could really think about. It is such a corrupt situation. Check out the video on this. It was basically where companies that were set up and they would lose all this money. The companies would lose all this money, and they'd lose the money because they'd be buying these ridiculously priced products that were owned by the other owners of the railroads, and they would just buy these products at like 300% increase. And the other company would go out of business because they were spending so much money, and it turned out to line the pockets of some of the railroad investors and some politicians. It was a huge scandal. Check out the video on that. Munn versus Illinois. Again, anytime you see the V there in italics, it's a Supreme Court case. This gave the government the right to regulate private industry. And so when you hear people say, oh, it's a free country, I can do what I want, the government can't tell me what to do, well, it can. And certainly when it comes to business, the government does have the right to regulate private business and private industry. And that is what this court case established. Interstate Commerce Act. Commerce again is doing business. And this specifically was to allow the government to regulate railroad activities. In the future, it gets expanded tremendously. But the argument was that the railroads were so powerful that they were abusing their power and hurting small farmers and businessmen, and it was unfair advantage. And eventually, the Interstate Commerce Act was passed to address that. And that is it for the short 6-2.